All right, this is my second series in the why series. I'm gonna try to be quick. I got a lot I want to cover, probably more than I can in a few minutes. The first one I did was getting out and asking why, looking at the scene and going, why did they do what they're doing? This part is really, where does why come from? We need to understand where why comes from so we can understand why it happened and the thought process behind it. And I'm talking at all levels, strategic, tactical, and task level. If you can understand why they did what they did, then you can understand the overall thought process, the scene, and you can also use that information to a benefit by either saying, this is great, and we're gonna keep doing this, or we need to change this. The example is, if you have somebody that's doing something really well, if you ask them where their why came from, you can then take that information and share it with the rest of your battalion. If somebody's doing something you don't wanna do or you don't think is the right way to handle it, then if you can figure out what their why is, one of two things will happen. You may find out they are doing it right and you were wrong, and you can change your thought process based on how much why they had behind it. And if not, if it's still something you don't want done, you still don't think it's the right way, it's always difficult to change people's minds. You'll never do it if you don't understand their why. If you can understand their why, then you can understand where they're missing information or where the information is leading them astray, and then you can use that hopefully to change their mind. You might not be able to, but at least if you understand why they're doing what you're doing, you can understand how you control it prior to the fire ground and on the fire ground. So asking why and understanding the why is critical for us to build a good training program and really to build a good team. Our entire job is science-based. My original degree was a fire science degree. And if you don't believe that it's science-based, just look at fire dynamics, look at lithium-ion batteries, look at hazmat, look at even USAR, look at rope systems and building construction, all science-based. And what that means is that we need to be scientists. We need to be studying what we're doing, and we can't have just one method of pulling information or one source. There should be multiple sources that we're using to tell us whether our tasks, our strategies, and our tactics are good and what we should be doing. And so I want to talk about a handful of them on where why comes from and some of the pros and cons. I'm not hitting all of them, I'm just hitting a few of them. But remember, there was a long now deceased Chicago fire chief who was real big in hazmat named John Eversole, and he had a quote about, how many calls they go on a day, 1,200. How many the people expect perfection, 1,200. He said they expect 4 triathlete, decathlon champions, brain surgeons, not 2 dumbass firefighters in a pickup truck. It's expected that we know what we're doing, and to know what we're doing means we really need to learn our why, where we're getting our why. And so I wanted to kind of talk about a couple of those and where they come from. And to kind of prove the point a little bit further, I've heard this many times. We need more people to know how to swing a tool or know how many people to swing a hammer. And I always misunderstood what they meant by that. I thought, I can swing a hammer, I can get a nail gun and lay 100 nails, but what's the point? And yes, it is important to know how to use a tool properly. But I think I don't need somebody so much knows how to swing a hammer. I need somebody who knows where the nail goes. Because if you know where the nail goes, you understand the building construction, you understand the physics behind it. So you know that when that nail's not there, or that nail fails and the lumber it was holding up fails, what's going to happen to that building? Again, physics. So we don't need people necessarily that know how to swing a hammer. We need people that know where the nail goes. And knowing where the nail goes is education, training, and experience. And we get that from multiple sources. So let's start with experience. Experience is a great tool. The whole sets and reps. There's nothing better necessarily, but there are hazards to it. One of them is just because you had an experience on something and saw it go right doesn't mean you saw the whole thing. On a structure fire, on any call, we only saw the job we did like this. A good example is you take a window and you see smoke lift and you think that worked out great. But in reality, down the hall, that in-train of air, the influx of air you allowed in changed the flow path, or it flashed the hallway. And so what looked good to you on the outside actually wasn't so good inside. But you walk away thinking that worked great when it necessarily did. Also, for years, we've had things that we've done that we thought were the right way to do it. And then we learned that it wasn't. Things changed, and we realized that for years we were doing it the wrong way and just got lucky. The one thing is I squirrel on this experience. We don't go on thousands of fires a year, so we need to take advantage of every fire we go on. And one way to do that is to do a very good job of learning from the fire that we're at. Again, we only see this in our job, so when the fire's over, we need to step back and we need to go to every side of that structure on the outside, and we need to learn. We need to learn things like, if I had to go down this side of this house, what are my forcible entry hazards? Could I even make it down the side of this house? Are there windows? Where do the windows go? With these windows, would they allow fire to go out and impinge on exposure. Even if that didn't happen on this fire, it allows you to look and go, what would I have done if this had been an exposure problem? And then you look at flow path. I have a window that broke. Did the window break because of heat? Did the window break because of something we did? And how did the fire change when that happened? And then you go around the entire building and you look at every side, regardless if there was fire on it or not, looking for things like that: access, forcible entry, flow path. As much as you can learn from that building. Then you go inside and you just don't go to the room of origin, you go to every room, even a bathroom that had the door closed with no damage whatsoever. And you're looking at flow path, you're looking at fire. You hear this a lot. We had well-involved fire, we had heavy fire conditions inside. Well, find out where there really was heavy conditions like heavy heat by where the melt level is on the structure inside that room compared to the smoke level, and whether it got in there, what happened with the closed doors. You want to look at everything you possibly can to learn from that fire and what happened. A perfect example is this. You go down the hall is blasted. You go down this hall, you walk down the hall, you're looking around. I mean, there was serious heat in this hallway. You get to a back room, the bedroom that had the door partially closed or completely closed, and there's very limited damage in there. That could be an indication that for this fire, you would not have wanted to pull a victim from that door or from that bedroom down the hallway, which means you probably wanted to go through another either shelter in place or get them out through the window. Then you want to look at the door. Would this door have allowed me to close the door? Is it hoarding conditions and I couldn't have done that? Then you want to look at the window. Could I have breached this window or broken this window? We know single pane windows are easier to break than dual pane windows. Look at the type of window. How hard would it have been to break? Something about dual pane windows, a lot of times the newer windows, they're actually huge openings, and sometimes you get almost as big an opening just by opening the window rather than breaking it. Could you have opened this window and would have given you a big enough window or hole to get the person out? What's outside the window? All of these things can be learned from every fire we go on. We just have to take the time to do it. That's building experience just as much as what we did on the fire ground actually fighting fire. Social media. Social media is a great tool. I love Instagram. I get some of the best stuff on Instagram. It's quick hits of information that can then lead me down the rabbit hole of more information. Yes, one of the negatives is it's small. And how many times we watch a YouTube video or an Instagram video and say, God, I wish there was more information. And it's not quite there, but it's still really good. LinkedIn, if you're looking for a lot of information, usually will lead you to reports, and full studies a little more in depth. The thing about social media is that you can get to a point where you start looking for stuff that proves what you believe. And so you may think that a tactic is the right way to go, and you start finding stuff that supports that, and then really it's not good information. You got to remember that social media, there is no credentialing. Anybody can post. Anyone can post anything they want on social media. So you've got to be careful. Again, that's why there shouldn't be one source of information. There should be multiple sources. So if you see it on Instagram, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be following reports, training conferences, et cetera, to kind of prove that that's what actually works. The other thing about Instagram, and you'll find this, is somebody who can be overly passionate myself. There's some great, I got a guy in there who does some search stuff. He's all big about search and rescue mindset. Some of his information is amazing, but he's very passionate. And every now and then he'll say something that's like over the top passionate. And I go, well, I don't necessarily agree with that because he's so passionate. It is what it is. Again, it shouldn't only be a source of information, not your only source. Articles and other things online are great. So are like peer-reviewed articles. And a lot of those are great information. You just have to remember that some of them, like even the ULFSRI stuff, it's done specifically to test one or two things. So you have to kind of realize that it's not testing everything on the fire ground, it's testing one or two things. And they're also very difficult to read, and they're done in controlled conditions, but they're still great information. Conferences, seminars, I can't stress enough, you need to get conference seminars, and you need to do it outside the county. If you're only getting training inside this county or inside this op area or inside this region, you're inbred. You're missing stuff that's out there. You've got to get out, and you've got to listen, and you've got to hear what's going on in the rest of the world. And the best way to do that is to kind of open up and go to other conferences and classes away from the county. FDIC, I've been there and seen some of the best people in the world. I've also been in other conferences. You got to remember, as somebody who's made the circuit, the only difference between me and anybody else was that I was willing to take the money to teach the class. So are they all great? No. But there's good information. Again, it's just another source of information and another learning point to put into your overall plan, your tactics, strategies, and tasks. So get out there and listen. One of the things you'll have happen to you is that you'll come back and go, we should do this. And you're right, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Just remember that that was all based and built on their area, their response patterns. It doesn't mean it won't work. It just means sometimes we have to manipulate it and change the tread on it so that it actually meets our needs as our agency and what we have. I already talked about reports and technical papers. The bottom line is you need multiple sources of information. You have to be pulling it from everywhere so that you're getting a true picture. If you're only using one source of information, then you're not getting good information. It has to be proofed other ways. Think of it as you're writing a research paper. You wouldn't just take one source of information, you would take multiple. So one of the things that I think we get stuck in, it's the fire service in general, is we do things that are based on how we've always done it. So I want to throw something out there, throw the gauntlet out. Please challenge me, tell me that I'm wrong, make sure that, come at me, but come at me with multiple sources. And if you don't want to come at me and prove me wrong, which I'm totally okay with, then look in the mirror and prove yourself wrong if you believe this. I want to ask you something. We've done this for 35 years since I've been in this department. For the 35 years in this department, the most trained, experienced, strongest firefighters, which are usually our support companies, that first support company goes to the roof. Why? There's no victims on the roof, none. So why do we take our best and send them to the roof? It is my opinion, based on my information, my why, that they would be better suited if they defaulted, instead of default to the roof, they defaulted to rescue. And I based that on multiple things, including the fact on how we staff our resources, how our resources arrive on scene. So maybe I'm wrong. Prove me wrong. Come at me. Please teach me something new. If you don't want to do that, then teach yourself something new. Go out and prove that you're right if you believe something different. I just hate that when we get stuck in things and we do this as an industry, we've always done it that way. Always challenge what we're doing and always learn and always get better and never settle for the status quo. So again, go out, start asking why. Where does why come from is one of the most important things you can do.